So hi everyone, welcome. Thank you for being here today. We're so excited to see everyone here on this cold, blistery Thursday in the middle of month 11 of a pandemic and everyone being a little Zoom fatigued. So it really shows your commitment here and we appreciate it. Tonight's event is part one of a longer series in the community education series hosted by the Muskingum County Social Justice Coalition, Muskingum County Library System, and supported by the City of Zanesville, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Chamber of Commerce, the Community Foundation. Phew, it's after our first initial community conversations last summer, we really saw a lot of interest in our community to learn about one another and the ways that we can become more inclusive in our community. There's still a lot of work to be done, but education and an open mind is the first step. So thank you. And before I give the stage to Daryl, I'll just ask everybody to stay muted. So Doug, that is completely fine. Unless you're speaking, stay muted. That way we don't get distracted. And please feel free to use the chat feature for anything that you'd like, especially questions. Additionally, please note that this session is being recorded and we may do some exercises that require some writing. So if you have a paper and pencil nearby, it will be in good use soon. So if you see the screens rotating through, it just shows you at the bottom screen where the mute button is, your camera on and off, as well as the chat feature right there. So lastly, we just ask everyone to be respectful as this is a safe space for everyone. And thank you for being here today. And I would like to go ahead and give it off to Daryl.
Thanks, Stephanie. I appreciate everyone being here today. You'll hear from me several times throughout the course of the next hour or so, but I just wanted to take a minute to say to everyone, we appreciate your time. As Stephanie mentioned, we know that many of us are spending lots of time on screen nowadays, so we appreciate you taking time to join us this evening. And we're going to do a couple of exercises just to kind of get a little bit more familiar with who's in the room today and talk about a little bit about why we're here. And then we'll go into some other things to share a little bit more about the Muskingum County Social Justice Coalition and some of the things that we are trying to do here in Zanesville and in Muskingum County. So before we go further, what we're going to do is we're going to launch a poll. So one of my teammates, Heather, is going to launch a 3-question poll, and we just need you to respond to that quickly. It's pretty easy. If you respond to that, and then we're going to show you the results based on who's participating and what our responses are. So please go ahead and do that now if you would. So it looks like about half the folks here heard about it some other way other than through social media or through a friend. So we'd like to hear a little bit more about that when we talk a little bit later. Okay, so about 2/3 of us have engaged in a similar session before, so that's good to know. That should hopefully create some comfort level for you as we continue with our conversation today to participate and really engage with some of the things that you're going to hear and talk about a little bit later. Okay, so a lot of folks are looking for just some education, more information, and a little over half of us are here to build relationships with other individuals in the community. So that is good to hear, because you're going to hear a lot more about relationship building as part of what we're trying to do. So that is good to see and good to know. So what those 3 responses tell me collectively is that most of the folks on this call have already been speaking with other people about some of the topics that we're going to talk about, and you've already been willing to be engaged or at least to listen to some other similar conversations, and that's good. And you're interested in learning more, which is absolutely why we're here. Hence the title, Community Education Series. So we're not here to just talk, but we're really here to try and educate each other as we navigate through the upcoming sessions. So you'll hear a little bit more detail about the sessions later. But now what I'm going to do is ask you to do an exercise that is a little bit more involved than the poll that you just completed with us, with those 3 questions, which I hope was pretty simple and not too taxing. We're going to dig just a tiny bit deeper and give you a chance to get to know a little bit more about who's in the room and share some things. And so we're going to do a little bit of an exercise called Commonalities. And what I'm going to do here in just a second, you were told earlier that you may need something to write with. So now is when you might need that if you have a pen and paper or something handy. We're not going to grade you for spelling. We're not going to grade you for penmanship or anything like that. You will not be asked to submit these electronically in any form. It'll just be for your own purposes. You can destroy them later, right? So, but what we're going to ask you to do is just participate in a little commonalities exercise. So in a minute, my teammate Heather is going to put you into breakout groups of about 5 people, 5 or 6 people. So there'll be several breakout groups. And what we want you to do in the breakout group is to list 5 things. Try and list at least 5 things. You can list more if you like. 5 things that you have in common with the other people in your breakout group. And so we want to keep it, not too personal, not too uncomfortable. So simple things like, for the examples I thought of were, being a Buckeyes fan, being over the age of 50, been out of the country, or, been hiking at Hocking Hills, things like that. Some pretty simple things, or whatever else comes up that kind of falls into that kind of category. Again, we're not digging too deep, but a little bit deeper. And of course, the thought behind that is how quickly you should be able to identify things that you have in common with the people in your group, no matter who they are or where they're from or why they're in this particular session. And so just a few housekeeping things that we want you to keep in mind as you participate. We're going to give you about 10 minutes to do that, 10 or 12 minutes, since we're doing well for time so far, because you all were prompt getting into the session, and I appreciate that. So a few housekeeping things to keep in mind. So we want you to, hopefully everyone participates. So whatever group you're in, please participate with the folks in your group. I know some folks are camera off, and that's fine. In the group, if you would, unless it's affecting your connectivity, we'd like you to be camera on at least while you're in the group so people can see who you are, who they're talking with. So hopefully everyone participates. Be respectful of everyone's shared information and those kind of things. Try to stay on task so that we stick with our 10 or 12 minute time frame, because we do have some other things to talk about. Select someone to report out for your group when we come back to the larger group. So please do that, hopefully at the beginning, so that when we come back, someone will be prepared to represent your group and share those dozens and dozens of commonalities that you're going to identify in 10 minutes, okay? And then again, just like I said, keep it broad, not too personal, but a little bit, so that you can find those 5 or 6 or 10 things that you have in common with the other 4 or 5 people in your group. Great. So thanks. I hope everybody kind of enjoyed our little getting to know each other more exercise. So what we're going to do is just kind of have each group report out. How many groups were there? How many breakout groups were there?
We had 5 breakout rooms.
Okay, so we had 5 breakout groups. We're going to ask each group to have someone report out on what your commonalities were. And there were 3 gentlemen in the group with me, so we'll go last, but we'll ask someone from the other 4 groups to go ahead and go first. So if you're not speaking, please mute so we can make sure we hear everyone. So one representative from each of the other 4 groups, please go ahead. And if you were appointed, go ahead and jump in and share with the rest of us.
Well, I was with group 5, and we came up with 5 commonalities. And the first one was human beings. We're all human beings. That was a given, hopefully. And we were all women. And we all are interested in social justice. And we all live in Ohio. and we love our community. So that was our 5 commonalities. And then from there, we went on to, you know, learning something about each other's background and what they're doing now. So it was just sort of a fun getting to know each other.
Thank you.
I'll go next. We were team number 1. And we decided that our lead commonality was that we've all been in prison. Either working or volunteering, not as a resident. At least not that we would admit. We all at one point lived in Columbus, and sort of a tangent on that, we love the North Market in Columbus. Fall is our favorite season. We have all shoveled snow recently. We all decided that Mexican food was our favorite. And we've all been to Cedar Point, and we've all had, our families are from Ohio. Let's see.
I think you got them all.
I think that's it.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
I can give our list if I can read my writing, which is a problem quite often. We all live within 50 miles of Zanesville. We've all been to Hocking Hills. We all had children. We all like chocolate chip cookies. We've all been on a plane. We've all been out of the country. We all like books. We're all over 30. We all really like comfortable shoes and pockets. We all agree that there should be more kindness and love in the world. We've all been to Cedar Point, so we had that one too. We've all been in the ocean, and unfortunately, we all know someone who's had a serious case like hospitalization because of COVID.
All right, thanks, Amy. One more group before my group.
A report on our group. Our group, we all have pets of one way or another. We are all Americans. We are all interested in learning more about racial justice and equality. We all like ice cream. We all have a background some way in or have learned about education. And we all like music and reading.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. So I'll represent the group that I was in, and I have to tell you, I had a bunch of cut-ups in my group, so it was hard to get our stuff documented. I won't say who was in the group, but they know who they are. So we were able to document 10 things, and what we had in common was pizza. We all like pizza. We're all football fans. We all have shirts on during this meeting. We've all been to Nashville. We all love children. We all like spicy chili. We all like to fish. We all think about work often, probably more than we should. And we all like cars. So we got to those 9 or 10 things pretty quickly. And so that's one of the things I like to talk about. So for every group, we were out for a total of 10 minutes, right, Heather?
Yep.
Did it actually take any of you the full 10 minutes to come up with those things? It did? It took 10 minutes?
Yeah, but to
Okay.
be fair, we had the most, so, you know, not that it's a competition, just saying.
How many did your group have, Amy? You had 12? Okay. So yeah, that was the most. So, but I asked that question just to kind of highlight the fact that you were able to come up with at least 5 things in 10 minutes. And 10 minutes doesn't sound like a lot of time, but it's actually a reasonable amount of time. But what it did was the exercise prompts you to, 1, go ahead and share. 2, think about some things that people may have in common with you, as opposed to thinking about the things that they may not have in common with you, or seeking to identify the things that people may not have in common with you. So we all went into the exercise thinking about, okay, so there's at least 4 or 5 other people here with me now what do I have in common with them? What do we share? What interests do we share? What experiences do we have in common? So what is it about these other 4 or 5 people that's relatable to me, so that we find some common ground? And I would suggest to you that one of the foundations of any productive relationship is the seeking of common ground, is to find out what you have in common with someone, no matter how trivial it may seem on the surface. It's a starting point. It's a starting point for building a relationship. And so what we wanted you to do was think about that. And it sounds like we had a little bit of fun with it, which is also a good way to start a relationship. When we have a task and we all share a common task that's not terribly challenging and not terribly complicated, but we've been asked to do it collectively as opposed to individually. I could have asked each one of you to take 5 minutes or 10 minutes and write down 10 experiences that you've had. And you may have written down some of the things that you identified collectively, but maybe not. But if you had, that would not have necessarily given you any more insight into the other people who are part of the group today. So hopefully what you took away from that was a little bit of fun, a little bit of information about some of the people that you were in the small group with, and of course, some more information about some of the folks in the larger group, which is also one of the things that we wanted to take away from this particular exercise. So I appreciate you taking the time to participate in that, and just think about why we're here. So I'm going to talk for a little bit, hopefully not too long that I bore you, but I'm going to talk a little bit in a little bit more detail, I should say, about why we're here and what we hope that you take away from it and what we are trying to accomplish. So you saw on the opening slide, and you heard Stephanie mention in the introduction, that the group that is offering the community education series is the Muskingum County Social Justice Coalition. So I love definitions, but I'll try not to sidetrack too much into defining all those different things. But I will ask you to think about the fact that a coalition implies that it's a group of people working collectively and collaboratively to accomplish something. So the origin of the coalition, I know some of you participated in the in the series on race, community conversations on race that were sponsored by the Muskingum County Library during the summer, over this past summer, that was a result of some of the incidents that happened on a national level, excuse me, around the country that we all saw on the news, and and some of them happened, excuse me, right here in Ohio. Fortunately, we did not have any incidents with that level of violence and some things that we saw that occurred here in Muskingum County or in Zanesville. But nevertheless, we're sensitive to some of the things that we do need to address. So the coalition was born out of those conversations. There were a group of people who decided to continue having conversations after that first 4-part series. And after several meetings, we agreed to form a coalition and continue trying to identify in a more concrete way some things that we could take action on that went beyond just the conversations. The conversations were good. They were healthy. They were cathartic, I think, for some, and certainly enlightening for some. But our goal was to move to action. And I can tell you one of the things that we try to think about and talk about is the conversation is good, but in the long term, we want some action. So that's where we're headed. But I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So we did go ahead and identify a specific mission and some goals that we want to think about. So our mission is basically what I've kind of already relayed to you, which is to work collaboratively to positively address racial inequities in social, economic, legal, and educational sectors in our community. And the goals are 2 things. primarily to serve as a space of learning and healing through the sharing of culturally respectful activities, resources, and experiences for the purpose of advancing free, peaceful, and prosperous community. And you'll hear the word community a lot throughout what I'm going to talk about and throughout our discussions. If you continue to join us, it's a word that we think about a lot and we promote that idea a lot. The other goal is to discuss, evaluate, and inform government and community organizations about some of the structural practices that result in inequities and work towards more equitable practices in our community. So you might be asking yourself at this point, so what are we about? So I'm going to tell you, if I had to just give you words, individual words, as opposed to a really long narrative, those words would be collaboration, transparency, positive solution-based conversation, and crucial conversations. So I'll say that again. Collaboration, working together. Transparency, we're not doing anything that's not out in the open. We're not doing anything that we're trying to hide or be deceitful about in any way. Positive solution-based conversations. So we're not in the business of attacking anyone or creating conflict or conversation or violence or promoting anything like that. It's all positive and solution-based, but also crucial conversations. Now, some of you probably heard that term before in a more formal way. And what that really asks you to think about is some of the conversations that we expect to have will be difficult. And we know that, not only among ourselves or among some community members, but with some of the organizations and some of the structural factions that we expect to communicate with over the coming months, weeks and months and years, if necessary. Some of those conversations will be uncomfortable, probably for everyone involved. That doesn't mean they'll be negative. It doesn't mean they'll be confrontational. It means we'll be talking about some hard stuff. But I think if you've been a part of any organization or group, whether it's work, community, social, civic, whatever, you probably recognize that very often when things are changing or change is being identified and enacted, there are some crucial and uncomfortable conversations that need to take place. And so part of why we are here as a coalition is because we have a group of folks who have committed themselves to a willingness to engage in some of those conversations. Not that they would ever be more comfortable or less comfortable, but the willingness to commit. And again, that's another word that you'll hear frequently throughout our conversations, not only transparency and collaboration, you'll hear about commitment. So we are committed to the work that we're doing. That's why one of the reasons that we wanted to do a series is because we understand that it takes time to affect change in the community. And we have a group of folks who are committed to that. So you were invited here tonight to hear about the community education series. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. So I'm going to try to answer some of the questions that I anticipate you might have, and then we'll have time for some discussion after that. If you have anything that you want to talk about, or any questions for me or the other members of the coalition who are present in our session today. And so one thing might be, why are we doing a community education series? You heard me mention a few moments ago that we understand that we have not had any of the events that rose to the level of some of the things that we saw on the news. However, we understand that there are some things here in Muskingum County that we want to address, that need to be addressed in terms of some racial inequity. And so that is why we decided to do a series. The other reason that we thought about doing a series is because we want to educate folks in a way that is conducive to people being engaged and creating relationships over a longer term. But we also, I'm sure there are some folks in this meeting who are not residents of Zanesville or even Muskingum County. So we also wanted to create something that could serve as a way for folks who are not residents to also come in and get some education and some information and some engagement about some very crucial issues, hopefully with a willingness to take it back to their community or to their workplace or to wherever they are engaging. Remember, about half of you said that you had engaged in similar conversations prior to tonight. So we hope you are continuing to engage in those conversations. And so one of the reasons we want to do a series is to encourage you to gain some of the information that we're going to offer and then take it back to your locale to do some things that need to be done wherever you are. So we appreciate you joining us. So what is the community education series? Maybe something else. So you heard me use the phrase shared space earlier. So the community education series is really just a shared space for education, conversation, and relationship building. And you may wonder why you've heard the term relationship building several times. So one of the things that I firmly believe is that in order to get a quality product, and we do intend to get a product from our work, which is some change in our community, one of the things that has to happen is good relationships, healthy relationships. And so one of the things that we want to do is build relationship through this education series. So again, one of the reasons we had to do the exercise is that we hope you will continue to participate with us over the coming months, but we also hope that you will connect with some of the folks who are in this session more and more and get more comfortable sharing who you are and sharing why you're here and sharing what you're about. Because I can tell you in a few months, tonight is an introduction, but as we progress through the series, you'll hear from a lot of other folks besides me. This will probably be the last time you hear this much from me, but you'll hear from some folks who are well suited to get into some of the hard stuff, some of the more difficult topics that are around the issues that we're going to address. And so we also want you to know that the folks that you're going to hear from, our presenters, are people who do have a stake in this community. So, one of the things that most of us are able to do now, since we're all on a virtual platform, we can get people from all over the world to come to our meeting and speak, right, to participate in our meeting. So I want to point out to you, we could have gotten people from other places, from a lot of different places, to join this group and talk. And not that that has no value, but we wanted to make sure that we have people talking to us who have a stake in what happens here in Muskingum County and what happens here in Zanesville. So most of our presenters will be people who have a very significant stake in what goes on here and what it looks like and how things are addressed that need to be addressed. So one of the things I also want to point out is, so we have support from the mayor's office, from the local chamber of commerce, and from the Muskingum County Community Foundation. In a small community like this, that's a lot of support. And that's not the kind of thing that you might necessarily see in a more metropolitan area. But so for us, it's important to note that those folks and those entities have agreed to support us. And when I say support, I don't only mean, just kind of say, yes, we like what you're doing, we think it's good, but to actually participate. So we have some folks here from the mayor's office tonight. We have some folks from some of our local law enforcement are participating with us, and we expect that to continue. So I just wanted to point that out to anyone on the call who's not familiar, that we have support from the folks that we need to have support from to help us make some inroads to do the things that we need to do here. So I just want to make sure we note that. So that's a little bit about what the community education series is. So one of the things I also believe in doing is making sure people understand what something is not. So I can tell you briefly what it's not, right? And I think it's important to know, and I hope you will keep in mind. So the community education series is not about shame or anger. We're not here to shame anyone. We're not here to just vent anger about past injustices or even recent injustices. You know, I can tell you, I could list a laundry list of things that I've encountered as a Black man in multiple communities all over the country, but that's not why we're here. We may have some discussions about those kind of things when it's relevant to a presentation or relevant to the conversation in a particular session. But that will not be an ongoing thing. The community education series is not about venting and reliving personal situations over and over. So we're not here for that reason. There's spaces for that, but this is not that space. Okay, it's not about, and this is just as directly as I can say it. It's not about Blacks telling white people how to be better people, right? So I'm not here for that. The other folks on this call who are minorities are not here for that. So I'm not going to tell you how to be better. I'm not going to teach you how to be better, right? We're going to talk about some things that need to be addressed in our community and how we can work collectively and collaboratively to address those things. I would even say it's not even about training, although you hear a little bit later about a certificate and some things that you might be able to do. So it's about learning, not about training. So ultimately what it's all about are two things: community and change, right? Community and change, all about a group of people who share a common space and time, which is this community, and all about change, which is either becoming something that we are not or making something better than what it currently is. So those are the two things that this series is about. We're going to spend the next 10 or 11 months talking about community and change, right? So the content, the format of what we're going to do is there's going to be 12 sessions. And Stephanie, can you go ahead and share your screen now so we can see? So I'll tell you what the topics are, so you can see what the topics are that we're going to talk about over the course of the next 11 months. All right. So you see the topics there. I won't read them all to you. I'll give you a second to kind of scan and see what they are. So those are our topics. You notice it says tentative, so they may change, but probably not. We have presenters locked in for all but one or two of our sessions so far, and those are ones that are further out towards the end of the year. Our schedule is going to be the third Thursday of each month, just like tonight. So you can make us appointment viewing, hopefully, from 6 to 7:15. There'll be a Q&A following each session. Our host is going to be the Muskingum County Library System on Zoom, so you'll get access that way. You'll get flyers and invites, and if there's any information or documents offered during a session, there won't be any tonight, but if there's any documents offered, you'll get them after the session via email, or we'll give you a link of where you can find them and download them. So we'll make sure we do that. And again, I'll share with you that the presenters will be folks who are professionals. Some are educators, some are in other professions, but they are proficient and well suited to talk about these topics. If you notice some of the things there, when we talk about where we are and how we got here, that's really getting into the heart of what these conversations are going to be about. And those may be some difficult things to really dig into, but we have identified, again, people with a local stake to really get into those topics with us and spend some time sharing information with us and what we're about. So I'm hoping that you're willing to join us as often as possible and really get into what we're doing and what we're learning, because I think it's going to be great, and I think it's going to position us well to accomplish what we want to accomplish. And so And so what we will accomplish is giving people an opportunity to help us identify things that need to be addressed and how we can address them. Because we understand that while the group that's been talking and meeting so far have identified, some things that should be addressed, we certainly know that we have not identified everything, and we also know that we don't have, all the good ideas. One of the things that I certainly have learned in my years in the workplace is that often I'm faced with a situation that requires a decision, and I talk to some other folks, and somebody has a much better idea than the one that I had and was about to pull the trigger on until I realized that I should talk to someone. So we understand that just because we are committed, that doesn't mean we have all the bright ideas. So we want you to engage with us and share your thinking on how we identify some things and what we identify and how we can move forward to address some of those things. So why should you do that? So we're going to give you 3 reasons why. The overarching reason is really just to have a better understanding of some of the social injustices and racial injustices that are manifested in our community, and determine what you can do to individually address them. And so one of the things I ask you to think about, and some of the folks who are already part of the team have heard me say this before, ultimately change in the community starts inside each of us individually. So I have to change how I think and how I view things and how I interact and how I move in the community. So once I change what I'm thinking about and change my own behavior inside my 4 walls and what happens inside my house and at my dinner table, then I can position myself to affect how I interact with 1 or 2 people in the community, and then expand to the workplace or my place of worship or the other places that I socialize. And so one of the things that we want you to take away from this is to identify for yourself, first of all, what is it about me that I need to see differently or do differently or think about differently? Because that's really where it begins. So we hope that you engage with us, but we hope that you engage with us, kind of through that lens about what can I do to be different, to be better. I told you a few minutes ago, I'm not gonna make anybody a better person, right? Through this conversation, through this series, but each of us can make ourselves better by taking in the information and applying it to ourselves and how we move and think and interact with each other and in the community. So that's kind of the overarching reason why we think you should participate. But a couple of other reasons. One is because we do want to make each other better. So I want to make myself better, and I want each of you to do the same. But hearing some of the commonalities, which we did in our exercise earlier, hearing some of those commonalities and building a relationship, as we've talked about, doing that is one way that we can position ourselves to have a relationship and help make each other better. So at some point, I should be able to talk to one of my teammates. I have a person already on the team that's my accountability partner. And so we communicate back and forth. I've developed a comfort level to where that person I feel comfortable saying, hey, is this good enough? Is this the direction I should be going? And they feel comfortable enough to say, I think this is good, or maybe you should consider this. Maybe you should consider changing something or tweaking this a little bit. That's what I'm talking about. So we can make each other better as well. So that's one of the other reasons that we want you to participate. So a couple of other things to keep in mind about participation are we're going to have a total of 11 sessions, what I call 11 content sessions. Very last session, which will be January of 22, will be kind of a celebration of making it through the whole series. But there are going to be 11 content sessions, including tonight. And so what we're going to do, remember I told you we have 3 organizations that are sponsoring us and supporting us. And so in conjunction with those organizations, along with the coalition, we're going to recognize folks who participate up to a certain level. So if you participate in 7 of those 11 sessions, at least 7, we're going to recognize you with a certificate and hopefully some other things that we're going to be able to do. Hopefully we'll be able to meet in person by then. That would be great. But we're planning to do all the sessions virtually. So that's the last thing. And we know that some of us, especially now more than ever, and some of our organizations are requiring or perhaps expecting that we participate in some diversity and inclusion training and those kind of things. So even though I told you this was not about training you, right? But we understand that some of us may have a professional opportunity to use this as a way to count for some education in a professional setting, and which is also one of the reasons why I reiterated several times that all of our presenters are professionals and well qualified to talk about the things that they're going to talk about over the course of the series. So those are some of the reasons why we want you to participate. That is what the community education series is about. And I hope that I've shared something that inspires you. Again, ultimately what we're shooting for is to move people to action. So I appreciate you being here. And that's all I have to share for now, but we have time. We still have time left in our session. So if anybody has questions, comments, anything you want to hear a little bit more about tonight or going forward, now's the time. You can unmute yourself and ask your question, or you can put a question into the chat.
I don't have a question really, but I just wanted to encourage everybody to go to the Muskingum History Facebook page. They have been posting a booklet that they found in their archives about a study that was done about Zanesville and race relations back, I think, in the 50s. They're like on the second posting of the pages. Let me see if I can pull it up. And it's quite disturbing. I mean, we've known there were problems since then, and it doesn't seem that we have made any okay, I'm not going to be able to find it, but it's disturbing, and I think everybody needs to take a look at it and see. You know, we really just the first 2 postings they've made, it's very plain that we haven't made any progress in the 50, 60 years since they did the study. So that's something to look at. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to find it.
Thanks, Rebecca. I think someone put it in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Right. So any questions? I know the meeting, we remind you earlier, the meetings are being recorded. So we'll be able to access the recording at a later time. Stephanie, where are we going to house the recording? Is it going to be with the library?
It would be on their YouTube page.
Okay. So the recordings of the session will be on the library's YouTube page.
I actually have a question. Yes. I've learned the answer, but I think it's worth knowing. You have one of the first sessions is what is culture, but the next one's cultural humility. Oh my goodness. Humility and relativism. And I didn't know what that was until, 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I didn't know if you or another person could explain cultural humility and relativism. It's been a long day.
I'm gonna defer to one of my teammates to talk about that a little bit. Dr. Jackson or Dr. White?
And you might say it better.
Right. Well, oh, Anita, I saw you on mute, so you go.
Cultural humility, and Amy, you can talk about cultural relativism, but cultural humility, there's been a lot of research done on that, and it's a recent, more recent, I guess, area that people have been talking about. And that's a really um, way of interacting with other people who are different than yourself, and just really listening and trying to get an understanding of their perspective. And it's a way of not trying to defend your own perspective, but really just taking time to listen, understand, and also find some common ground, and be able to develop a relationship as you are talking about these differences. And this is an example, a personal example, was for a person that I know. We talked about our trips to Alabama back in the 1950s. And she said, "Oh, you went to Alabama?" And I said, "Yes." And she said she did. And we talked about our experiences. And there was just this wonderful aspect of sharing that story, but also her understanding the challenges my family had traveling south in the 1950s, and me understanding her experiences as she traveled. And they were very different. But it was just, a wonderful way of being with one another and sharing that. So, yes, in a sense, are we humble enough to really listen to the other person and understand their perspective? I hope that helps you in understanding cultural humility. There's been a lot of research on that, and the research shows that when people are displaying humility, the relationships are a lot more powerful and beneficial and positive.
Thank you.
Amy, you want to say something about relativism?
Yes, and thank you for doing humility. You didn't. That was an excellent description. Um, Cultural relativism is generally the idea that our culture influences the way we think, and in some cases, even what we see as right and wrong, or what we see as moral, immoral, or permissible, impermissible, etc. That in a way, we all walk through the world with almost different colored glasses on, depending on how we were raised, how, you know, the cultural environment that we lived in. And many groups, in groups and out groups that we belong to, and they taint our view of the world in ways that we might not even recognize that they do. And by opening ourselves to this idea and others, we can kind of, in some ways, better understand without being quite so judgmental. Although there are definitely limits, like the idea that culture is relative isn't going to fly when you talk about, say, the morality of the Holocaust. But you know, um, but perhaps not jumping so much, creating mutual understandings, and recognizing that our view is a very biased view, quite honestly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, anything else about other topics, or anything else about the series, or anything that you heard tonight?
Yeah, I just had one comment. Back in the early 50s, we were living in Virginia when my husband was in the Army. And coming from Cleveland, I just wasn't used to how they handled things there. We went to a drive-in theater and they had two separate entrances. And I just never gave it a thought because that's just the way it was. And you look back and I think, why didn't I even question that? It was just so accepted and common that when I look back, I think, oh my gosh.
So that's a good reference, Anna. So one of the things that we'll get to throughout during our series is some of those things. So obviously that is not the case now, but there are things that still take place that are representative of that kind of behavior in the community. And so those are the kind of things we will be thinking about and figuring out the best way to collaboratively address those things locally. Okay, do we have anything else? Anything else for the good of the order? Any other comments, concerns, thoughts? Anything else to share? Dr. Jackson, yes.
I'll just say that I think this education series is so valuable and so important. And Daryl, I certainly think you did a just wonderful job explaining all the content and so forth. And our thinking behind this, as we had those conversations during the summer, there were a number of people and questions about things that we don't know about. And we had not heard this before. We don't know about this. And so that's kind of how the education series began to develop in wanting to do this, because a lot of this has been left out in our upbringing, through schools, through our communities, and so forth. And so this will give us a chance to learn some of these things and to see how this really helps us to connect more effectively with one another. So I think this whole education series is very important.
I agree. So again, I really encourage everyone to participate with us as often as you can. As you can see, we do a pretty good job of staying on time. So we expect to start at 6 and end around 7:15. There will be a pretty similar format each time. There'll be a presentation on whatever the topic is. So if you participate, those of you who are here tonight will get an invite from the library system, from Heather or from me, for the next session. The next session, this should be an easy date to remember because it'll also be on the 18th. So it'll be March 18th, and we're going to meet every month on the third Thursday at 6 p.m. And when you get the invite or the flyer, please share it with folks in your network, other folks in the community, or wherever you are. Again, the education portion of this is really designed to be global. So we want to create a model that we not only can find to be effective here, but that really can be effective in other places as well. So we want to kind of set the tone for how this is done. Again, it's going to be more than conversation. Ultimately, we want to lead to action, but the conversation is going to be very directed on all the topics that we showed you, with the idea of each of us having an opportunity to change internally and then begin to change outside our four walls. That's what we want to get to. So unless someone has another question, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you being attentive and participating in our exercises. So I hope we had a little bit of fun with that. And think about the commonalities. And again, I would encourage you to think about how quickly you were able to identify 5 things that you had in common with some other people. I know some of us were in groups of people that we knew a little bit or we at least met before, but some of us, I think, probably not. And so just think about that, even between now and the next session, when you encounter someone in a meeting or whatever the situation is. I know it'll probably be virtual, but just think about, what do I have in common with this person? Not how different am I? Do I look different? Is my skin different? Do I dress differently? Do I believe different things? But what do I have in common? And I guarantee you it will have an impact, a positive impact on how you start relationships with people, even in a virtual setting. And so I just encourage you all to do that. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you being here. And I hope to see all of you and some new faces in our next session on March 18th. So Have a good night, and we'll see you then.